Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. We are going right down to the University of Virginia. We have Jennifer Lawless. She is the chair of the political science department, and last night was the State of the Union. Professor, what did Joe Biden accomplish last night?
He demonstrated that he has energy and that he has the kind of excitement, I think, that people are looking for in a campaign. So there's no question that he's not as clear or articulate as he was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, but the messaging was strong, the delivery was strong, and I don't think that anybody that watched that speech should be too concerned that he's too old. So I think those were the main goals of the White House, and it seems like they did accomplish them.
Well, and 30 years ago, he would have just plagiarized that speech. So there's been improvements in some areas, lesser in others. He did seem to have, I think the word has been energy, right? He projected well, he commanded the room, he was loud, he was louder than the mockery of the Republicans. Is that the best he could accomplish in that one event?
Well, the other thing that he did that I think is just as important as that is the ad-libbing, which demonstrated a level of wit and quickness that people would also be inclined, I think, to believe suggests that he's fully with it cognitively. And frankly, he called the Republicans out for a lot of the antics that they've been demonstrating, which isn't typical of the State of the Union address. It's usually more of I shouldn't say a state affair, but it's certainly less of a campaign vehicle than what we saw last night. But it would have been a lost opportunity for Biden not to have sort of campaigned the way that he did. So on that front also, it was a win. There aren't a lot of wins to be had when you have such a polarized Congress. But in terms of communicating a message to Democrats and independents who might be reluctant, it seems like he did as best as we could have expected.
So the game within the game, there was a dynamic in which he went off speech and fired back. He misspoke a little bit. He called the young woman at the University of Georgia who was murdered by the wrong name. He didn't call her Laken Riley. He called her Lincoln Riley. And then he called the perpetrator who is alleged to have killed her an illegal. Was that a big win for him? Nancy Pelosi criticized him for calling the perpetrator an illegal, or was that actually maybe Joe Biden's being smarter than everyone else and saying, I'm going to call this out and maybe collect some folks in the middle of America?
I think I think that a lot of liberal Democrats don't agree with the rhetoric and the language. But in terms of communicating a very tough on immigration stance, which is what he needs to do to win Republicans, immigration is not only the most important issue to Republicans right now, but for independents it is as well. Speaking the language that they speak is not necessarily a political liability. So it's not like the Democrats have a lot of places to go on that, and he might be able to pick up some Republicans and some independents. Now, I don't know if that was completely staged, but it was clearly what he thought. So it was either conscious or not, and I don't think it was a political loser.
Yeah, and I don't think Nancy Pelosi is so offended that she's now going to support Donald Trump. I'm guessing she's not.
Or not vote, or a third-party candidate. I mean, in the broad scheme of things that you can be offended by, I think that the one anecdote during a State of the Union address, especially regarding a situation that's so raw, he probably gets a little bit of a pass from the liberal Democrats.
The administration has floated out this idea of creating a port in Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid. That has ruffled some feathers of what I think some Americans, and especially some Republicans and independents, say we can't even fix the border and we're going to go put troops in a port in Gaza. It seems to be the perfect location for terror attacks via Iran. How is this a winning? I understand the desire to get humanitarian aid quicker and faster to Gaza, but is that a really winning strategy going into the election cycle?
Well, I think it's the morally right thing to do. I mean, there's a humanitarian crisis and 2 million people are starving. I mean, so it's hard to figure out what to do if not that. But putting the moral component of it aside, my hunch is that the administration is going to be working with people on the ground to do the best that they can to ensure that it's not a really leaky border situation, to ensure that this really is a way to deliver food and aid, and it's not, a hotbed for terrorism. So time will tell, and we'll see. And it might be the case that it's not workable because of some of the things that you've mentioned. But at this point, I mean, I don't think it was that people in the administration woke up in the morning and decided, oh, let's try this today. My sense is that it was well thought out, and it might not bear the fruit that they're hoping, but I assume that it'll be done in a secure way.
I appreciate the rhetoric on humanitarian aid, but down in Haiti right now, the prison system has failed. The most highest level criminals are out on the street. It was a country in complete dysfunction before this took place. Now there is literally marauding terror throughout the area, and the ports, which were key to getting not only aid there, but whatever limited trade was still available, are now in peril. We've heard nothing from the administration on Haiti. This is in our sphere. This is right down the street from us. And we're not hearing anything there. It seems to be Michigan, large Arab population, important, humanitarian aid for Haiti, less important.
Well, look, there's no question that the Gaza-Israel war right now is playing a major role in the campaigns that we're seeing for president. There's no question. It's also, a hotly debated issue among members of Congress, but it's important to realize that it's not only the humanitarian aid. There's also this very, very delicate balance that needs to be struck in the Middle East, or else there's going to be complete global chaos. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't care about what's going on in Haiti, or that the people in Haiti don't deserve the same kind of humanitarian aid, but I don't think it's only about the presidential election. That's certainly part of what's going on, but it's also about the global balance of power and what happens if one domino falls in that region.
Just before I came on the air, New York Times had a text alert that Donald Trump has posted somewhere around $90 million for a bond for $90 million to satisfy the court on one of the judgments against him. How does this play out? Is there politics to any of this, and in what's going on in the courts? And is any of this to the detriment of Donald Trump from a political standpoint?
I think it's a detriment to Donald Trump potentially in two ways, but not based on the verdict and not really based on the dollar amounts that he has to post. The first is it's psychological warfare as far as he's concerned, right? Like questioning what his worth is, him having to demonstrate that he has the money to put up, the fact that he might have to sell off some assets in order to satisfy all of the judgments against him clearly affects him, and it is bothersome to him. And so that is a distraction. And when he's distracted, he says things that can ultimately come back to hurt him on the campaign trail. The second way that it's a problem, is because for some sliver of people, not his base, but for some sliver of people, his business acumen that he always purported to have was one of the qualities that they saw in him that allowed them basically to push aside a lot of the qualities that they did not like. And every time these judgments are issued, the indictments are issued, he posts these amounts of money, there's more attention questioning, the extent to which he's really worth what he says he's worth. And, a few thousand voters here or there in a swing state could be what it takes. And so this isn't good news for him on that front either.
What should we be looking for over the next couple of weeks? We're through the State of the Union. Congress seems to be paralyzed. So it's not likely we're going to see any legislative solution to immigration. Ukraine's much in question. More aid to Israel's in question. What are we going to see, both from a congressional standpoint and a political standpoint?
My sense is that Congress is going to be able to do very little between now and November. The two things that I would say are really relevant as far as politics are concerned for the next week or two is, first, what does Nikki Haley do? Is she going to get on board and fully and enthusiastically endorse Donald Trump and campaign for him the way that some of these other candidates have? Or is her silence going to continue to give permission to at least a sliver of the Republican Party and probably, half of the Republicans in Vermont, that they don't have to get on board? And then the second thing is, what is No Labels going to do? They keep releasing statements, and people keep releasing statements indicating that the following people will not be running as their candidates. So it will not be Joe Manchin, it will not be Nikki Haley, it will not be Kirsten Sinema. Are they not going to be putting forward a candidate? Because that will fundamentally change the dynamics of the race as well.
Could Donald Trump score a deal with Nikki Haley, get her to be his vice president, and really change the dynamics?
I don't think so. And I also think that if he did, the reception of that would not really be as positive as a lot of people initially think, for a couple of reasons. The first is that means that she has spent the last 5 months, 4 months, doing everything that she possibly can to suggest that he's not qualified to be president, that he doesn't have the temperament to be president, and that the world would be a more dangerous place with him as president. And then she's going to just sign on as second. And the other thing is, we all know that Donald Trump's vice president has zero power, zero sway, zero influence. And so it's not clear to me, this is not like the first term when he appointed Mike Pence and people thought, well, he's a legitimate elder statesman, he has congressional experience, he's a governor, he can sort of hold Donald Trump in check. No one expects that to be the case anymore. I also think, frankly, that Trump is only going to be surrounding himself with acolytes, whether that be the vice presidential nomination or people he starts mentioning he would give cabinet positions to if he gets elected. So it doesn't seem to me to be a strategy that either the Trump side or the Haley side would embrace.
George Herbert Walker Bush said pretty nasty things about Ronald Reagan. I know you were probably like in grammar school at the time, but if you go over to that UVA big library, check the Dewey Decimal System, they can probably find some of those comments. And pretty nasty speak, and all is forgiven, and they led the country for 12 consecutive years.
Look, you can go back even further. You can go to some of the first elections and duels on the floor and Jefferson and Adams. And I mean, we've always seen this, but it's not necessarily the case that for such a sustained period of time, somebody who was in the candidate's administration, I mean, she was at the UN, says that on both domestic and foreign policy, he's a danger. So I think there's something to be said for criticizing candidates during a primary and then coming together and uniting for the general election. I wouldn't be surprised if she winds up doing that and endorsing him. I would be surprised if she gets on board. The other thing is, Donald Trump harbors grudges. She was a thorn in his side for several months, and he doesn't forgive. So I think it's just, and he also doesn't see the political reality that could potentially, or the political benefits that could potentially ensue. So I just think it's impossible. You heard it here. Watch, it'll be Trump.
Jennifer Lawless, chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Virginia. As always, thank you for joining us. For everybody else, stay tuned. It is a busy Friday. We're going to have a bunch of updates throughout the day. This weekend's a busy weekend. Providence College is hosting the University of Connecticut, the top team in the Big East, I think third ranked in the country. Tonight, Rhode Island College women, 29-0, go for their 30th consecutive win this season. They are playing in the Sweet 16 at home at the Murray Center on the Rick campus. Stay tuned for coverage on all of this, and appreciate it, and get out and enjoy this great weather. Thanks, everybody.